Going viral can make you a superstar overnight, but what you do with that fame determines whether it becomes the beginning of the success or the reason for the doom. For saltbae, a 10-second clip changed everything. 1 minute, he's the internet's luxury chef, sprinkling shore for the biggest celebrities every week. Next, he's slashing prices at failing restaurant locations, getting kicked out of the Champions League after party, and being dragged for fear by the same internet that once worshipped him. It's wild to think that a man who turned the sprinkle into a multi-million-dollar brand could fumble it all so badly. But that's exactly what happened, and saltbae's downfall is only getting worse. And I am Tiltati. To understand how we got here, you need to know where it all started. Before the memes, the gold stations, the cringe moments, saltbae was just news record chair, a school dropout focused on developing his butchery skills. For a long time, nobody knew his name or even cared about him. He was just a regular guy whose passion had him traveling to gain culinary experience. Eventually, Nusret launched his own steakhouse in Istanbul, and his career began growing. He started filming himself at work, slicing meat for a tiny online audience, but in 2017, Nusret posted one clip just 10 seconds long of him flicking his wrist and sprinkling short like a showman. He didn't know it just yet, but that sprinkle style would make him an internet sensation. At first, the sprinkle turned Nusret into saltbae, the must-visit chef for celebrities and billionaires. His Istanbul steakhouse became a hotspot for public figures, where the rich and wannabe rich assemble for a taste of the viral magic. He expanded fast, with new locations popping up in London, Milano, Greece, New York, Miami, Dubai, and Qatar, and every one of his restaurants show virtually the same thing: overpriced steak wrapped in gold leaf, and the chance to say you've eaten at the famous saltbae steakhouse. Saltbae became a living tourist attraction, and eventually people weren't just paying for steak, they were willingly paying outrageous amounts for an experience, watching him sprinkle salt on their $1,000 gold-coated steak. And for a while it worked. But when you build an empire on spectacle salon, it only takes one tasteless stunt to make people rethink everything. Like in 2018, when Venezuelan's President Nicolas Maduro showed up for a private meal at saltbae's restaurant, happily getting served expensive steaks during a time of great famine in his country. And of course, that came with a lot of backlash, but at least most of the outrage was aimed at President Maduro. Food tastes so much better when you know folks back home are starving. As a Venezuelan, it angers me seeing my president feasting on a meal while me and my family were starving. Shame on him. This controversy made people see saltbae and his restaurant in a bad light. To them, he was someone who cared more about money and fame as opposed to morals. But the thing about always chasing the spotlight is that sooner or later it turns on you. Fast forward to December 18, 2022, at the FIFA World Cup final in Qatar. Moments after Argentina's victory, saltbae somehow snuck his way onto the pitch. While that was wrong in itself, what he did next made it even worse. Because while the world was celebrating one of football's greatest moments, saltbae was focused on something else entirely. And from the look of things, how to make himself the star of the show in a moment that made millions cringe. He shoved his way into the player's spot, dragging Messi for a selfie and even putting a player's medal in his mouth. But what angered people even more wasn't just him trying to perform his short sprinkling magic, but he tried to snatch the World Cup trophy and even kissed it, a privilege which he strictly reserved for the winning team. Everyone was confused and uncomfortable. Even Messi's body language made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with the spectacle. After the footage went viral, football fans in the media slammed saltbae for disrespecting the rules and trying to overshadow Argentina's victory. What he did was really disgusting. Some legends couldn't even touch the trophy yet. We have a clout holding it. This is the example of people live without feeling shame at all. People talk embarrassing about this man at World Cup. And when Saltbae was later asked why he did it, he simply claimed he was excited and that he didn't know he was not supposed to touch the trophy, which of course didn't make things better. I didn't go on pitch with the purpose of advertising. I just felt like it, then it was a bit of a surprise. I never ever wanted to overshadow anything. I didn't like the attention. Well, we all know how true that is. That single moment not only made people cringe, but it also crossed the line that forced FIFA to step in.
Football's governing body, FIFA, has opened an investigation into a security and protocol breach at the end of the World Cup final in Qatar. This after celebrity chef Saltbae was filmed harassing players from the victorious Argentine team, including Lionel Messi.
The situation was so intense that FIFA had to launch a full-on investigation into how he even got onto the pitch in the first place. Then they proceeded to ban him from all future FIFA events to prevent this from happening at any level of football. You would think that kind of global embarrassment would make Saltbae tone things down, at least when it comes to such a mainstream sport. But Saltbae would again prove that his thirst for clout was greater than any amount of shame he could be forced to endure. Because recently he tried to pull off another headline-grabbing stunt, and this time it backfired even harder. During the Champions League after-party, which is typically for players who've battled it out in the intense tournament, Saltbae showed up uninvited in an attempt to sprinkle his way back into the spotlight one more time. But unfortunately for him, things wouldn't go his way this time. Instead of slipping in unnoticed, he got caught red-handed and was publicly humiliated and kicked out by the security like any other party crasher. Of course, Saltbae tried to save face. He claimed that he was there to return the love and sign autograph for fans, and that he was totally unaware it was an exclusive event, again playing the ignorance card. But here's the thing, Saltbae didn't just wake up one day and decided to crash football events for fun. A lot of things behind the scenes had most likely pushed him to the desperate stunts. And when you peek behind the curtains of his tech empire, it all starts to make sense why he was clout chasing this hard. Because the truth is, Saltbae's shiny image wasn't as golden as it looked on Instagram. The illusion of perfection began to shatter when his own staff started spilling what it was really like working for Saltbae. Reports began to surface of his workers complaining about the exhausting work culture where they were overlooked, underpaid and treated unfairly. One non-Turkish manager claimed that he was constantly sidelined and mistreated, and when he finally dared to speak up about the discrimination, he didn't just get ignored, he was swiftly demoted. This was a clear serious act of favoritism, and according to reports, Saltbae was heavily discriminatory. However, it didn't stop there. Female staff told even darker story. One says she was forced to wear club outfits instead of proper uniform for waitresses. When another reported being sexually harassed by a customer, she was brushed off and told to play along. Some employees even went as far, calling him a dictator with a god complex. And if the other allegations are true, like seizing workers' passports so they couldn't leave the country, it's not hard to see why they would give him that label. When 5 of his crewmen couldn't pay his ill treatment anymore, they proceeded to take him to court, accusing him of unpaid overtime after they worked over 72-hour weeks, while he pocketed a 3% cut of their tips. Now, although 3% may not sound like much, taking any amount of tips is an act that could only be described as unnecessary greed, especially when he doesn't really provide a pleasant work environment. When the case got to court, the judge couldn't see it in any other way and ordered him to compensate them a sum of $230,000. But just after the court ordered him to pay, he would once again show his true colors by firing them suddenly, claiming he wasn't satisfied with their performance. What a funny coincidence. But it wasn't just his staff who had enough. Pretty soon, the customers started asking uncomfortable questions as well. For a while, the outrageous prices at Saltbae's restaurant were part of the flex. People loved showing off golden steak and $1,000 tabs. But all of that changed the day Saltbae himself posted a customer receipt with the smart caption, "Quality never expensive." which is a paradoxical statement that actually implies that no price is too big for quality. That was a big mistake, as what he thought would boost his luxury image blew up in his face. His followers were livid, and they finally started doing the math and asking the right questions. What exactly are we paying for? Is this the gold leaf that you can easily get at a local baking shop for just $13, or the beef itself, which he claimed to be a high standard, even though former employees admitted being forced to lie to customers about the meat quality? That's when people realized they were dropping absurd amounts of money for what many consider average food at best. And when people compare the prices drinks would sell at the mall to how much he sold them, it makes them even more furious. One Heineken is $55, one Red Bull is £30, and two glasses of Coca-Cola are $18. What was once seen as a luxury started to feel like a scam, and in no time, the internet that once worshipped him totally turned on him. Mocking comments about his ridiculous prices began flooding in. Ratings were beginning to be poor, and the reviews pulled up calling his food meat than outright terrible. At one point, his restaurant was even ranked as one of the worst in London. But if you think that was bad, the biggest blow to his reputation was something that happened way back in 2018. And this time, it wasn't about money, it was about people getting hurt. His need for flashy stunts backfired in the most horrifying way possible. A reckless tableside fire show that literally set his customer in flames.
Oh my god! Ah! I yandı! Oh my god!
Four unsuspecting tourists who visited to have a taste of his signature experience ended up walking out not just disappointed but scarred for life. The most tragic case was Christina Chesnakova, a young model who suffered a third-degree burn over 35% of her body. Accidents happened, and that was obviously a very terrible one. All in all, he ended up facing around 8 lawsuits, not just from burn customers but also from furious workers who had enough of his mistreatment. Suddenly, saltbae wasn't just a guy with a cool sauce sprinkle. It was a punchline for inhumanity and made people wish he was punished. But the ripple effect didn't stop there. In 2020, there was another report of a major altercation with a customer. The customer, Bruno Miranda, claimed to have had his order changed to something more expensive, from the standard $275 tomahawk steak to the golden option, which would cost $1,000 each. And he wasn't informed about the upcharge until it was time to pay, leaving him with a $5,000 bill. As a result, he refused to pay such an outrageous amount until the restaurant called the cops on him. To avoid further conflict, the customer was forced to pay, but took to social media to repeatedly call out saltbae. This had a great impact on saltbae's internet image, as even celebrities who once flocked to him for a viral photo with his golden steak quietly backed away. And when you look back at everything you've seen so far, it finally makes sense why he's clung to the spotlight so desperately, even when it meant embarrassing himself. Fast forward to 2025, with lawsuits piled up and the internet's love for saltbae turned to ridicule. It became clear that his gimmicks weren't landing, as he wasn't just taking hits online. His restaurants were also bleeding cars. That was when saltbae finally started to face reality. And what came next just proves that this was just the beginning of how bad things could really get. In his location in London, staff reportedly had to turn off the heating system during peak hours in order to reduce operational costs. It was such a cheap move from a renowned multi-million-dollar franchise. In the bid to sustain his empire, saltbae did something that no one ever saw coming. You see, saltbae was a money-hungry opportunist who seized any chance to make a few extra bucks than he is actually worth. At least, we can confirm that with his ridiculous pricing and stealing of his staff's tips. And that's what made his next move feel even more desperate. He dramatically slashed the prices at most of his restaurants, a complete U-turn from the luxury sky-high prices that made him famous in the first place. This move was quite ironic from someone who says quality is never expensive. But when your franchise is on the verge of shutting down, and you're about to lose all that you've built for years, you would care less about past principles and adopt new ones if that's what it takes to survive. Unfortunately for saltbae, his price slasting didn't bring him as many customers as he expected. Because let's be real, even after cutting down his prices, his stake was still way down the bridge for the average person, and the fate of his restaurants was already nearly decided. One by one, his restaurants that once boasted a month-long waiting list and even charging over £200 for a reservation, now found it difficult to get filled on a busy Friday night. If you think that's bad, the restaurant empire he means so hard to build has rocked in the US from 7 locations to 2 in just 2 years, and the situation isn't getting better internationally. But the saddest part for Nusret is that he isn't just losing money, he's losing himself. When you think about it, he started out as a humble butcher who genuinely loved his craft, but once the internet turned him into a meme, he got a taste of that attention that he wasn't willing to let go of. And so he kept chasing relevance. Now he isn't seen as a world-class chef, nor is he respected for his recipes. He is just a cringe guy who sprinkles salt. saltbae is living proof that going viral can be a blessing and a curse, especially when your whole brand depends on being a meme.